Welcome to my small batch big taste kitchen, and today we are making the perfect comfort food for a cold winter's night. We are making beef stew for two. We're gonna make it on the stovetop, and it makes the perfect amount for two people with maybe a little leftovers depending on how hungry you are. For the stew, we're gonna use some chopped carrots, potato, Worcestershire sauce, garlic, onion, brown sugar, flour, beef broth, salt and pepper, and some stew meat. So to make this a beef stew just a little bit quicker and easier, I am going to use stew meat, which comes already cubed up. It's in the meat section at the grocery store. Or you could buy a boneless chuck roast and chop it up yourself. I'm also going to use my cheddar onion. I think I've shared this before. This is onion. You will find it in the freezer section already chopped for you. I hate chopping onions, so I am a cheddar onion fan. And we're also going to use today a russet potato, but you could totally use any potato you have on hand, such as a red potato or a Yukon gold potato. And if there are other veggies, we're just using onion, carrot, and potato. But if there's other veggies you want to throw in, feel free. Such as if you want some peas in there, I would just throw those in at the very end. But you can get creative with the veggies that you put in. Now, because this beef stew does take a couple of hours to cook, this is one of those meals you're gonna wanna maybe do on a weekend or a day when you have a little bit more time. For our stew, I am gonna use a covered small Dutch oven. You just want some kind of pot that is fairly heavy duty that can go on the stovetop that has a lid. We're gonna start by just dusting our meat with flour, and then we are going to brown or braise it. In a zippered plastic bag, I'm gonna add a tablespoon of all-purpose flour, a quarter teaspoon of salt, and then about 1/8 of a teaspoon of ground pepper. All right, and then we are just going to, I'm using about, actually slightly over a half a pound of stew meat. Put that in. Wash my hand, and then we're just gonna go ahead and toss this to all that meat that's coated, lightly coated with the flour. The other ingredient I think I forgot to mention was some oil. Now I'm gonna use olive oil, but you can also use canola oil or vegetable oil. And we're just gonna take our pot and put about a tablespoon, half a tablespoon of the oil in the pot. We're gonna take this over the stove and heat the oil on a medium-high heat, and then add in our meat, and we're just gonna brown it till it's lightly browned on all sides. Now, what this browning helps to do, it just helps to create a nice little crust on the meat, seal in some of those juices, and add a little bit more flavor to your beef stew. If you're in a big, huge hurry, I have been known to skip this step. Be sure that your meat is in a single layer on the bottom of the pan. So if you're doing extra meat, you may need to do it in 2 batches. It'll depend on the size of your pan. All right, it'll take about 3 to 5 minutes to brown the meat. Then go ahead and take it out of the pan, just onto a bowl or a plate, and set it aside. After you remove the meat, leave all of that food that has kind of built up on the bottom of the pan. That is gonna add a lot of good flavor into the stew. We're gonna add in a 1/4 cup of our chopped onion, and we're just gonna cook that for a minute or two till it gets nice and soft. So after our onion is softened, we're gonna take our chopped minced garlic. I've got maybe 2 teaspoons here. We're gonna add that in. Just stir it around for a minute. You don't want it to get brown or crispy or crunchy or anything like that. Give it a stir. And then we're gonna take our beef broth. I am using, you can use a cup, to actually up to 2 cups, just depending on how soupy you like your stew. I'm using about 1.5 cups, and I may add more in later, I may not, or if I find that my stew is a little too soupy, I can thicken it up, and I'll show you how to do that. All right, and then we're gonna just let this cook for a minute, and as it cooks, it's gonna loosen up all those little cooked bits of food that are in the bottom of the pan that we kind of wanna scrape up into our stew. And then we're gonna add in a teaspoon of brown sugar and a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. And then just stir that as it simmers a bit to loosen up all those little bits on the bottom. And then we're gonna add in a little seasoning. Now you can use seasoning of your choice. I am gonna use some thyme, about 1/2 teaspoon of dried thyme, 1/2 teaspoon to a teaspoon of dried parsley. And then we'll salt and pepper it at the end according to taste. All right, we're gonna bring it up to a boil. Again, scrape up all those little pieces that are on the bottom. And then we're ready to put our stew meat back in. We're gonna turn it down to a simmer. We're gonna put our lid back on and let it simmer for about 45 minutes. We're gonna check it every so often to make sure that there's still enough liquid in the pan, and if there's not, we'll add in some more beef broth. So after the meat has simmered for about 45 minutes to an hour and it's nice and tender, we're gonna add in our carrots and our potatoes. And then we're gonna let this simmer some more for about 30 minutes until those veggies are nice and tender. Our stew is done. It's simmered for another 30 minutes with those carrots and the potatoes, and they are nice and fork tender. Now, the liquid in my stew right now is pretty thin. You may like it like that, where the liquid's more like a soup, but if you want it more stew-like, thicker, where the liquid is thicker, we're gonna take a tablespoon of cornstarch. I have a tablespoon of water right here. I'm just gonna mix those together. And then we're gonna take this mixture into our stew, to stir it in, and we're gonna put it back on the heat at a medium-low heat and let it simmer for a few minutes to let that broth thicken up. All right, it's thickened up, and now our soup is ready to serve. Now, this beef stew would be perfect served with one of those small batch bread recipes we made last month, like that soft rosemary bread or the crusty no-knead artisan bread. Any of them would be delicious. So all you have to do, grab a spoon and enjoy. Small batch beef stew. Thanks for joining me in the kitchen, and I'll see you in the next video.